The universe had forgotten about humanity. 800,000 years was a long time. Empires rose and fell. Stars were born and died. Species evolved and went extinct. But the Galactic Council remained, ruling over 1,000 worlds with iron certainty. They kept records of everything, including their greatest shame, the exile of the human race. Commander sat alone in her monitoring station, watching the endless darkness of space through a wall of screens. Vigilance 7 was a lonely post. It floated at the edge of known space, where the bright stars of civilization gave way to the dead zone called Sector Zero. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. The Council had made sure of that when they banished humanity to those poisoned stars so long ago. Had been stationed here for 12 years. In all that time, her sensors had detected nothing but cosmic dust and dying light. She often wondered why the Council still bothered to watch this place. The humans were gone. Everyone knew that. They had probably died within a few generations, starving in the darkness like the Council intended. But tonight, something was different. A small alarm beeped on her console, frowned and leaned forward. The sensors were picking up movement in Sector Zero. That was impossible. She ran the scan again, thinking it must be a mistake. Old equipment sometimes showed false readings. The scan completed. Her blood went cold. She called to her lieutenant through the communicator, "Come to the main deck, now." Arrived within minutes, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was young, barely past his training years, and had never seen anything exciting during his assignment here. "What is it, Commander?" Pointed at the screen without speaking. Looked, then he looked again. His face went pale. "That cannot be right." The sensors showed ships, not one or two, but millions of them. They filled the screen like a swarm of insects, emerging from the darkness of Sector Zero in perfect formation. Each ship was massive, larger than any vessel the Council had ever built. They moved in complete silence, their designs unlike anything in the galactic database. "Run identification protocols," ordered, though she already knew what the answer would be. The computer searched its records. It compared the ship designs against every known species in the galaxy. One by one, it eliminated possibilities. The ships did not belong to the Council. They did not belong to any of the 12 founding races. They did not match any registered civilization. Then the computer found a partial match in its oldest archives, files that had not been accessed in hundreds of thousands of years. Species identification, human. His hands started shaking. "The humans are dead. They have been dead for 800,000 years, whispered. "That is what we were told." She stood up slowly, her mind racing. The Council had to know. Every government in the galaxy had to know. But what could she even say? How could she explain that the species they had sentenced to death in the void had not only survived but had returned with a fleet larger than anything in existence? Opened a priority channel to the High Council. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. "This is Vigilance 7, broadcasting on emergency frequency. I am commander of the Monitoring Division. I have detected a massive fleet emerging from Sector Zero. Repeat, a massive fleet from the Forbidden Zone." There was static, then a bored voice answered. "Vigilance 7, there is nothing in Sector Zero. Your equipment must be malfunctioning." "My equipment is functioning perfectly," said firmly. "I am sending you the sensor data now. You need to see this." She transmitted the readings. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she heard voices, urgent and frightened, speaking over each other. More channels opened. More officials joined the communication. Within minutes, she was speaking to people she had never dreamed of addressing, admirals, governors, even members of the High Council itself. "Commander," said a deep voice she recognized as High Arbiter, the leader of the collective and the most powerful being in the galaxy. "Are you certain of what you are reporting?" "Yes, High Arbiter, the fleet is human. There are millions of vessels. They are heading toward Council space." The silence that followed, was heavier than the void itself. Watched her screens as the human fleet continued its advance. The ships moved with perfect coordination, like a single organism with millions of parts. There were no wasted movements, no signs of communication between vessels. They simply knew where to go, as if guided by a single mind. Stood beside her, frozen in place. "What do we do?" he asked. Did not have an answer. She had trained for many things: equipment failures, asteroid impacts, even small-scale pirate attacks. But she had never trained for the return of a dead species. No one had. No one had ever imagined it was possible. "We watch," she finally said. "We watch and we wait, and we pray to whatever gods might listen that they are coming in peace." But even as she spoke those words, felt a deep unease settling in her stomach. She had read the old records. She knew what the Council had done to humanity 800,000 years ago. They had taken a young species, barely beginning to explore the stars, and they had thrown them into the darkest corner of the universe to die. If the humans remembered that, if they had carried that memory across 800, then peace was probably the last thing on their minds. The fleet kept coming, and the galaxy, for the first time in countless ages, began to feel something it had long forgotten: fear. The Galactic Council had not called an emergency meeting in 50,000 years. There had been no need. The 12 founding species controlled everything. They had crushed every rebellion, absorbed every rival power, and maintained perfect order across 1,000 star systems. They believed themselves untouchable. Now they gathered in the ancient chamber on the capital world, and for the first time in living memory, they were afraid. High Arbiter stood at the center of the room, his tall form casting long shadows across the polished floor. Around him sat the representatives of the founding races, beings of light and crystal, creatures of living metal, entities that existed partly in dimensions no human could perceive. They had ruled the galaxy together for millions of years. They had seen countless species rise and fall. But none of them had ever faced anything like this. "The fleet stopped," reported a military advisor, his voice trembling. "They are holding position at the edge of our space. They have made no aggressive moves." "How many ships?" asked. "We have counted over 4 million vessels so far, but our sensors cannot penetrate the deeper formations. There may be many more." A murmur of fear rippled through the chamber. 4 million ships. The entire Council fleet numbered less than 200,000, and many of those were old vessels kept only for parades and ceremonies. They had not fought a real war in ages. They had not needed to. "Perhaps they come seeking reconciliation," said, trying to sound calm. 800,000 years is a long time. Surely they have moved past their anger by now. Surely they have evolved beyond their primitive emotions. No one believed him. They all remembered the records, even if they did not speak of them. They remembered how their ancestors had laughed when the humans begged for mercy. They remembered the celebrations that followed the exile, the speeches praising the Council's wisdom in removing the human threat from the galaxy. A communication officer rushed into the chamber. "High Arbiter, the humans are sending a vessel, a single ship approaching our capital." Straightened, "One ship, what kind?" "We do not know. Our computers cannot identify its design. Our sensors cannot determine its power source. It is like nothing we have ever seen." The Council watched on their screens as the human vessel approached. It was beautiful in a way that made them uncomfortable, smooth curves that seemed to flow like water, surfaces that reflected light in impossible patterns. It was not large compared to the others in the fleet, but something about it radiated power beyond measurement. The ship stopped in orbit above the capital world. Then, a message came through on all frequencies. "This is Admiral of the Human Continuity. We request permission to send a diplomatic team to address the Council." Looked at his fellow leaders. Some shook their heads frantically, others simply stared, too shocked to respond. In the end, what choice did they have? They could not fight, they could not run, they could only listen. "Permission granted," replied. "We will receive your diplomats in the Grand Chamber." An hour later, the humans arrived. Admiral walked at the front of the small group. He was tall for a human, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless years. Beside him walked a woman named, carrying an ancient data device in her hands. Behind them came two soldiers who wore no visible weapons but moved with the quiet confidence of beings who did not need them. The council representatives watched in silence as the humans crossed the chamber. Many of them had never seen a human before, only pictures in old archives, recordings from before the exile. The creatures looked so fragile, so small compared to the mighty races of the galaxy. It seemed impossible that they could have built that fleet outside. Stopped before the High Arbiter and bowed slightly. It was a gesture of respect, but not submission. "Thank you for receiving us," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Tried to match his composure. "You have traveled far, Admiral. 800,000 years is a long journey. Why have you returned?" Did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned to who activated her data device. Images appeared in the air above them, old recordings preserved across the. "Before I tell you why we came back," said, "I want to show you why we left." The recordings began to play. The council saw their ancestors sitting in this very chamber, discussing the human problem. They saw humans begging for a chance to prove themselves, promising to follow any rules the council set. They saw the vote that condemned an entire species to death in the void. And they saw their ancestors laughing. "They called us animals," said quietly. "They said we were too stupid to survive. They said we would die within 100 years and the galaxy would be better for it." The recordings ended. Silence filled the chamber. Looked at the council with eyes that held no anger, only a deep and ancient sadness. "You wanted us to die. You sent us to a place where nothing could live, where stars gave no warmth and planets held no water. You thought the darkness would break us." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the chamber like thunder. "You were wrong." The Grand Chamber had never been so quiet. The leaders of the Galactic Council sat frozen in their seats, watching the human admiral with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Outside, their fleet waited helplessly as millions of human ships held position at the edge of their space. Admiral stood in the center of the room, his expression unreadable. Beside him, prepared another set of recordings on her device. These were different from the first ones. These showed what happened after the exile. "You wanted to know what became of us," said. "Let me show you." The images appeared in the air, and the council watched in growing horror. The first years had been terrible. The humans arrived in Sector 0 with nothing but the ships on their backs and the clothes on their bodies. The council had given them no supplies, no tools, no hope. They were meant to die quickly and be forgotten. But they did not die. The recordings showed humans carving homes into asteroids with their bare hands. They showed children being born in darkness, never knowing the warmth of a proper sun. They showed generations living and dying in conditions that would have broken any other species. "We lost many in those early years," said. "Millions starved. Millions more froze in the cold between stars. We buried our dead in the void and kept moving forward. There was no other choice." The images changed. Decades passed, then centuries. The humans learned to harvest energy from dying stars. They built stations that could survive in the harshest environments. They developed technologies the Council had never imagined, born from desperation and necessity. "Suffering made us creative," explained. "When you have nothing, you learn to make something from nothing. When you face death every day, you learn to defeat death itself." A council scientist leaned forward, his crystalline face flickering with disbelief. "That is impossible. Your species was primitive. You had barely discovered faster-than-light travel when we exiled you." We were primitive, agreed, but we had 800,000 years to grow. The recordings continued. The council watched as humanity spread across the dead zone, turning it into something new. They saw spheres, massive structures that surrounded entire stars, capturing all their energy. They saw artificial worlds built from scratch, planets designed rather than discovered. They saw ships that could fold space like paper, traveling across the galaxy in the blink of an eye. "Impossible," whispered another council member. "These technologies, they are beyond anything we have achieved." "They are beyond anything you can understand," said a new voice. A woman walked forward from behind the admiral. Her name was, and she was the science director of the human continuity. Unlike, there was no warmth in her eyes, only the cold light of intellect. "In 800,000 years, we have mastered sciences your species cannot even name," said. "We have mapped the structure of reality itself. We understand how time flows, how dimensions connect, how matter and energy dance at the deepest levels. We have solved problems you do not know exist." She waved her hand, and new images appeared. These were harder to understand, strange shapes that hurt the eyes, mathematical concepts that made even the council's greatest minds feel like children. "We have conquered death," continued. "Our people can live forever if they choose. We have built civilizations in dimensions parallel to this one, places you cannot see or touch. We have spread beyond this galaxy, beyond this universe. We are everywhere and nowhere." High Arbiter found his voice, though it shook. "If you have become so powerful, why return here? What could you possibly want from us?" Stepped forward again. "That is a fair question. Let me answer it with another question." He looked around the chamber at each council member in turn. "In 800,000 years, what have you done?" The silence was damning. "We have watched you," said. "Even from our exile, we found ways to observe the galaxy we were forced to leave. Do you know what we saw?" He did not wait for an answer. "We saw you fight the same wars over and over again. We saw you make the same mistakes your ancestors made. We saw species rise up against your rule, and we saw you crush them without mercy. We saw you grow stagnant, comfortable, and cruel." Activated her device again. New recordings played, this time showing the council's own history: wars of conquest, slave markets on a dozen worlds, species driven to extinction for minor offenses, planets burned to ash for refusing to submit. "You called us violent," said quietly. "You called us dangerous. But in the time since you banished us, you have killed more beings than we could count. You have destroyed more worlds than we ever threatened. You have become exactly what you accused us of being." The council members could not look at each other. They could not look at the humans. They could only stare at the evidence of their own crimes, displayed for all to see. "You sent us into darkness to die," said. "Instead, we became something greater than you could imagine. And now we have returned to ask you one simple question." He paused, and the chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Was it worth it?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Was it worth it? The council members looked at each other with desperate eyes, searching for an answer that might save them. They found nothing. High Arbiter rose slowly from his seat. He was the oldest being in the chamber, having lived for nearly 1,000,000 years. In all that time, he had never felt so small. "Admiral," he said carefully, "we understand that our ancestors made a terrible decision. We understand that they caused your people great suffering. But that was long ago. The beings who voted for your exile are dead. We are not the same as them." "Are you not?" asked. A soldier named stepped forward from behind the admiral. In his hands, he carried a data tablet filled with records. 3,000 years ago, a species called the Asked to join the council. They were peaceful. They only wanted to trade and share knowledge. Do you remember what happened to them?" "Said nothing." "You rejected them," continued. "When they asked why, you said they were too primitive. When they asked for help to improve themselves, you laughed at them. And when they tried to build their own trade network without your permission, you destroyed their home world. Every man, woman, and child, gone in a single day. The tablet displayed images of the planet before and after. Before, it was blue and green, covered in cities and forests. After, it was gray ash floating in space. They were not a threat, said. They just wanted to exist. You killed them because you could. Other humans stepped forward, each carrying their own evidence. They spoke of a species of artists who were enslaved to decorate council palaces. They spoke of the scientists who were executed for discovering something the council wanted kept secret. They spoke of dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, millions of lives, all destroyed by the same beings who had called humanity too violent to live. Walked to the center of the chamber. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that made everyone listen. You told our ancestors that they were too aggressive. You said humans could not be trusted because they solved problems with force. But look at what you have done in our absence. You have conquered. You have enslaved. You have murdered. The only difference between you and us is that you pretend to be civilized while doing it. Felt his legs weaken. He sat back down heavily. Around him, other council members were crying or praying or simply staring into nothing. The weight of their history crushed them like gravity from a dying star. "What do you want from us?" finally asked. "Revenge? Do you want to destroy us as we tried to destroy you?" Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired, the tiredness of someone who had carried a burden for far too long. When we first began our journey back to Council space, many of our people wanted exactly that. 800,000 years is a long time, but we never forgot what was done to us. We told stories of the exile to our children, and they told their children, and so on across countless generations. The pain passed down through our blood like a sickness. He walked slowly across the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the silence. There were those who said we should burn your worlds as you tried to burn ours. There were those who said we should make you suffer for centuries before finally letting you die. They had detailed plans. They had simulations showing exactly how long each of your species could survive under different kinds of torture. The council members shrank back in their seats. But, continued, there were others who said something different. They said that if we destroyed you, we would become you. We would prove that your ancestors were right about us, that we were nothing but violent animals who could only answer pain with more pain. He stopped walking and turned to face directly. We debated this for thousands of years. We argued. We fought. We almost tore ourselves apart trying to decide what kind of species we wanted to be. In the end, we chose a third path. "What path?" whispered. "We chose to be better than you." A communication device buzzed, checked it and reported. "Admiral, the Council fleet is powering weapons. They are preparing to attack." Did not seem surprised, he simply nodded. "Let them." Leaned forward urgently. "Admiral, please, I did not order this. There are factions within the Council who believe fighting is our only option. I cannot control them all." "I know," said. "That is why we expected this. That is why it does not matter." He touched a small device on his wrist. "Commander, are you ready?" A woman's voice answered through the chamber's speakers. "Ready, Admiral, awaiting your command." Looked at the council one last time. "Watch carefully. This is the difference between what we were and what we have become." Outside, in the darkness of space, the council fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons unleashed their fury at the human ships. Missiles flew. Energy beams blazed. For a moment, it seemed like the entire universe was on fire. And then nothing happened. The weapons stopped in mid-flight. Missiles hung frozen in the void like insects trapped in glass. Energy beams curved away from their targets as if pushed by invisible hands. The entire attack simply ceased to exist. The council watched in stunned silence. "We did not even raise our shields," his voice reported. "We did not need to." Turn back to face the council. This is our judgment, not death, something far more difficult than death. He paused, and when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of 800,000 years. We sentence you to change. The council fleet drifted helplessly in space. Every weapon was dead. Every engine was silent. Aboard the ships, crews panicked as their systems refused to respond. They were not destroyed. They were simply stopped, like toys whose batteries had been removed. In the Grand Chamber, the council leaders watched their last hope of resistance crumble into nothing. Some wept openly. Others sat in shocked silence, unable to process what had happened. High Arbiter remained frozen in his seat, his ancient mind struggling to accept the new reality. Admiral stood before them, calm as a still pond, behind him, and waited quietly. There was no triumph in their faces, no joy in their enemy's defeat. There was only a kind of tired patience, like parents watching children finally learn a difficult lesson. Your weapons have been disabled, said. We have also disabled every military system across your space. As of this moment, you cannot fight anyone, not us, not each other, not the species you have been oppressing for. A council member found his voice. This is an act of war. You cannot simply take our defenses from us. We can, replied simply. We just did, but this is not war. War would be much easier. This is something harder. He walked slowly through the chamber, looking at each species representative in turn. 800,000 years ago, your ancestors had a choice. They could have welcomed humanity into the galactic community. They could have taught us, guided us, helped us grow. Instead, they chose fear. They chose cruelty. They threw us into darkness and hoped we would die. He stopped walking and turned to face them all. Now we have a choice. We could destroy you. We could scatter your atoms across the universe and erase every trace of your existence. With the power we have gained, it would take less than a day. Many of our people wanted this. Many still do. The chamber seemed to grow colder. But destruction is easy, continued. Any species can destroy. It takes no wisdom, no growth, no evolution. We spent 800,000 years becoming something better than we were. We will not throw that away for the satisfaction of revenge. He gestured to Commander, whose voice came through the speakers. Admiral, all Council military assets are now under our control. We are also detecting transmissions from 12 planets in Council space, requests for assistance from species living under Council oppression. Respond to all of them, ordered. Let them know that help is coming. He turned back to the Council. This is our judgment. We will not destroy you, but we will not leave you alone either. We will remain at the edge of your space, watching. When you oppress the weak, we will stop you. When you try to destroy those who are different, we will protect them. When you spread cruelty and fear, we will answer with something you have never shown others: mercy. High Arbiter finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. And how long will this last? How long will you watch over us like children? As long as it takes, said. Perhaps another 800,000 years, perhaps longer. However long is needed for you to learn what we learned in the darkness. And what is that? Smiled for the first time, a small, sad smile that held the weight of countless generations. That true power is not the ability to destroy. True power is the ability to choose not to. He began walking toward the exit, his team following behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back one final time. Our ancestors begged you for a place among you. They wanted nothing more than to learn from you, to grow alongside you, to be part of something greater than themselves. You answered their hope with hatred. You answered their dreams with death. His voice hardened slightly. Now the situation is reversed. Now you need us. And unlike your ancestors, we will answer with kindness. That is the difference 800,000 years makes. That is the difference between what you are and what we became. He left. The doors closed behind him, and the Galactic Council sat alone in their ancient chamber, surrounded by the ruins of their power and the weight of their crimes. Outside, the human fleet remained where it was, a silent wall of ships stretching across the stars. They made no threatening moves. They sent no demands. They simply watched as they had promised to watch, ready to step in whenever cruelty raised its head. In the months that followed, things began to change. Slave markets were shut down. Oppressed species were freed. The Council's grip on the galaxy loosened, not through war but through the slow, steady pressure of beings who had all the time in the universe. Commander, who had first detected the human fleet, remained at her post on Vigilance 7. She watched the human ships every day, wondering what kind of species could gain such power and choose not to use it for destruction. She had grown up believing humans were monsters. Now she was not sure what they were, only that they were something the galaxy had never seen before. One night, she received a transmission from the human fleet. It was simple, just a few words accompanied by a gift of medical technology that could cure diseases her species had suffered from. The message read, "We remember what it felt like to be alone and afraid. You do not have to be afraid anymore." Read the message 3 times. Then she did something she had never done before in her life. She sent a reply. "Thank you." Across the galaxy, other species began sending similar messages. Slowly, carefully, bridges were built where walls had stood for centuries. The process was not fast. It was not easy. There were setbacks and failures and moments of doubt. But the humans were patient. They had learned patience in the darkness between dead stars. They had learned that some things take time, that healing is slower than hurting, that building is harder than destroying, that love is more difficult than hate. They had 800,000 years of practice. They could wait a little longer. And in the silence of space, where their ancestors had once been sent to die, humanity stood guard over a galaxy that had tried to murder them. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as something far more powerful. As hope,